Morning, ladies and gentlemen, afternoon or evening, depending on where you are. Today we're going to talk about an interesting topic that's come up a number of times, and that is hexagon squares. It is a very complex idea looking at hexagons because you're looking at triangles and Ys and not rectangles and different ways and whose heads when you're in, got more than four sides to a square. Guido Haas from Germany has been working on this. He doesn't do it often. I think he probably calls about 30 or 40 hexagon dances a year on a regular basis, and he's constantly doing it. He's developed an approach which is a much easier approach to introducing hexagons and the concept of hexagon squares, and we've asked him to come in and give us an outline of his approach. As always, the notes and everything else will be available afterwards. Guido is in a little town in Germany, which I will let him pronounce because last time I tried to pronounce it, I buggered it up big time. But Guido, as always, more than welcome. Guido looks at things in a very technical way, but he also takes the technical and makes it simple. So please welcome Guido Haas from Germany to talk about a simple approach to hexagon squares.
Yeah, thank you. And the name of the place I'm from is Großhansdorf. It's a Grand Czech village, Grand Village, whatever you try to translate in other companies. And in the local language here, Plattdeutsch, Lower German, it's called Großhansdorf. So, but I just understand the dialect here. I don't speak it. I'm Bavarian. At first, I would like to know who of you has never seen hexagon dancing? Just raise your hand or so.
Yolanda, okay. Scotty.
There's quite a few.
Couple, yeah.
Who of you has never called hexagon? Okay. And who of you has called real hexagons? Okay. So I'm going to start to share my screen. What I'm looking at is to take any fear away from you. You just answer those questions. Short history. I started to call real hexagon in 2007. A senior citizens group I called for dropped from 17 to 15 dancers, and I asked them, well, 8 can dance and 7 sit out, or 12 can dance and 3 sit out. And this was my experience that I had. Almost nothing. Since then, I'm calling 40 to 45 real hexagon dances per annum, and I'm teaching real hexagon, or I'm teaching square dancing in a hexagon for experienced square dancers and some people who never danced square dance before. When they arrive in my senior citizens group, they start with circle left in a hexagon and they learn all those calls. And my philosophy is that they have to be able to dance in a square also when there is no hexagon. This presentation will have I'll show you an easy access to a real hexagon, whether you have experience or not, and even for dancers that don't have real hexagon dancing experience. You will see the definitions in a different light, and I will show you some pitfalls that you should avoid and how you can do that. What I do not show is site resolution for hexagons. This would probably take at least as long as this seminar, just the site resolution. And since there are several systems, it's evening filling. Okay. You learn chopping cucumbers when you chop them with a sharp knife and when you repeat that often. Hexagon calling is as easy as strumming 3 chords when you accompany some singing with a guitar at a campfire. And real hexagon calling is as difficult as using the same guitar and playing Tommy Emmanuel's version of classical gas. And he has practiced his chops. If you've never seen that, look it up on YouTube. It's a little over 4 minutes long, and you will see what an Australian guy from some rural area can do with his classical guitar. For just as a preliminary action, the colors I use, there are blue, green, red, and yellow. This is what I started with when I started to call. I had different color schemes before, and I never could remember who was who, so I ordered them in alphabetical order. And they're ever since. And when there were 2 more couples I had to accommodate, I added orange and violet, and also add those in alphabetical order, so I don't have to worry about it. We have 3 forms of a setup. We have a square, we have the 6-couple rectangle that we use, that some of us use, and we have the honeycomb shape, the hexagon. In a square, we have 2 head couples and 2 side couples. In a rectangle, we have 4 head couples and 2 side couples. And in a hexagon, we have 3 head couples and 3 side couples. There are 4 quarters in a square. And in a hexagon, I see 6 quarters. So it's 1.5 squares. 1.5 of 4 quarters is 6 quarters. And the math behind it is 2 quarters is 1/2. That is, when I call heads or sides promenade half, they promenade the same distance as in a square. They pass one couple or one position and stop at the next. The head promenade is the same distance as in a square. The side couples go away and the heads don't have that far to travel. Why? Usually people don't grow fat just because they dance hexagon. So they're the same people. They need the same space, and so you need the same distance. But if you call heads or sides square through 4, that's a far shorter distance. Those couples are way faster than those in a square. Who is who? Original partners, original corners are the same as in a square, mostly. Unless you're dancing hexagon to a square dance caller who's calling for squares, then original partner and original corner might change in that moment because you end up at different positions when he says promenade back home. And now some original opposites. In a hexagon, we don't have the word opposite. When you look at the hexagon on the right side corner, you see that just opposite of the blue couple is the couple dressed in yellow. But this is just an optical illusion that they're opposite of you. They're not actually there because they're side couples and the couple dressed in blue is heads. So these are not the opposites. Who do you think? No. Where is your opposite in a hexagon defined so that it fits the definition of the opposite in a square without using the word opposite? What do you think?
Your opposite is the next one to the right, the next side to the right, or the next head to the right.
You can't have an opposite in threes.
Well, it's everything's 120 degrees here, so it'll be 60 degrees off.
Well, but the definition of opposite must also fit the definition of opposite in a square. And make it easy. Doesn't matter if you're a boy or if you're a girl dancing. Look at your corner and say, you're number one, your partner is number two, and the third person, that's my direct opposite. So, in a square, it's the people you face. In a hexagon, for the lady in blue, it's the boy in red, and for the man in blue, it's the lady in orange. This is okay for a pass-through, for a square-through, those people you start some calls with. But who is the guy who courteously turns the lady when you do a lady's chain? That's, if we take the lady in blue, that's not the boy in red, that's the boy in orange. So we have two opposites in a hexagon. This is the schizophrenic element in a hexagon. It's a split personality. Sometimes it's here and sometimes it's there. And since it's an easy approach, we don't talk about anybody else. A reason why I prefer real hexagons over those rectangles is the number of arrangements that are possible. In a square and a hexagon, we have 6, and in a rectangle, we have 20 different arrangements. And here's the math behind it. So it's just, for me, it was the easier approach. When you look at sequence states, we have 4 in a square and we have 4 in a hexagon, and we have 36 different sequence states in a rectangle. And here's the math behind it. And if you're interested, I have the Excel sheets to prove it, to make it visual. It's actually that way. And in a square, when you call a square, you keep the sequence, whatever you have. In a hexagon, the sequence state might change depending on the choreography in a square. Most times, it does not maintain the sequence. Most times it changes. It really disorders a hexagon when you call square choreography. When you look at the technical phases, this is what we call as corner box, right-hand lady box, corner box, ocean wave, right, left, right, ocean wave. I have the same names for the same technical phases. We look at those. We have a corner box in sequence. And when you look at that, the sides are active. The sides have done the respective sequence of calls. And the green boy is looking at the blue lady, and the green lady is looking at the red boy, just in the square and in the hexagon. So we have a corner box, it's the same thing. A right-hand lady box out of sequence, this is what you have in a square, is a side square through. In this case, it's the same thing. Look at the green couple, they look at the same people. And when they do it, the others do the same thing, but yellow people have other people to play with than in a square. A lead right box is the same thing. Sides lead right. The greens look at the reds. Lead left, sides look at the blues. And here I have a round picture in here on the lead left box for the square. I have to change that before it's before Mark gets it. And we have a third lead box. I call it lead straight ahead box. This we don't have in a square. We don't need it there. And you get there with a heads or sides square through two hands, star through, pass through, or whatever. This is actually a very cool box in a hexagon to call from. We have the corner box ocean wave. This one looks a little crazy in a hexagon formation. They look distorted, but this distortion has a purpose, and most calls are easier to dance if the formation is distorted like this. Some calls are more difficult. If you look at that formation, you have parallel ocean waves. When I go back to that, you see that the boys and the girls on each half of each wave are in tandem. They really have a box circulate formation. And this way, they can relate to and dance the calls quite easy. But most formations have a Y shape. We'll look at some of those. You see facing lines. This would be if you make the line straight. And I can assure you, dancers will have a lot of problems when the dancers form lines like this on the left side when you give them certain calls. They just don't know where to go. If you teach your dancers to have this Y shape, general lines, they see with who they pass through. But on the other hand, if your next call is a tag the line from here, they will have a problem with the Y shape. You just need to know this. You should be aware of this. It's not that you should not call this, but in the beginning, you should stay away from calls like attack the line from this formation. Lines facing out is a different thing. When dancers over-exaggerate, they don't have a clue what the other couple they kind of face is doing there. So when you have lines facing out, the triangle is, for most dancers, the preferred form of the formation. When you call a center straight in the Y shape, they don't see that other person as a center because they almost look at them.
What we determined before.
Then you have what we had before, the ocean wave, and here you see also I have the triangle form here, and in the other half you can see the box circulate formation in each half. And here's two more. We have a general tidal line on the left hand, and we have a line between facing couples, and we have a tag formation. So this here is the difference from, let's say, if this would be an ocean wave, you would call spin the top. This would be the result. let's look into some definitions. Definitions do not change just because you call real hexagon, but the wording does change. You have to transmit or convey the actions to the dancers that they do. When you select the call for a hexagon calling, observe what the dancers do in the square, but what they would do if they dance correctly, not what they do after they transmogrify their definition in their own putting of actions. This is important. And then you revert the definition to describe that action exactly. Let's take you apply the definition first to a square, and then you try it with a hexagon. And let's do it with a sample definition. I chose flutter wheel. This here is the text of the dance action of the current definition of flutter wheel. Just look at that definition, read it so that you know it. Then, because of the better wording, I went back to the old definition, the one before the rewording. And please read that and compare to the other to see that the action is actually the same thing. It's just written differently. Because we will now work with that older definition for ease of description. When you have done that, we proceed. On the left, I have the older definition, just a little reformatted to fit it with the hexagon definition. And now read and compare what is in a square and what is in a hexagon. When you're through, let's look at that. Now I want you to apply the hexagon definition to a square. Has anybody anything other than that the head boys exchange places? Now apply this to a hexagon. The question I have for you now is, when you say the heads started flutter wheel and the blue lady and the blue boy are head couplers, so are they red and orange? Where does the blue lady end and where does the blue boy end?
Well, don't the boys just shift around one position to the right? The lady's going to make a star and then pick up the other guy and take him back home?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Guido. This is, sorry, I think I just cut off somebody. Was that you, John?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure where I'm at, so go for it.
Now, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is this is the way the current definition is written, and it doesn't work well with hexagons. Is that correct?
it works well with hexagon, but it's a lot harder, and I need a lot more words to take the current definition to make that in the hexagon.
Yeah.
Because the new definition combines a couple of things, and you go back home
Yeah.
while the old
so they pick up on 2, but they finish on 3. So they
Yeah.
go in for 2, but come home on 3.
Yeah.
Hey, can we show this on terminations? They'll do
No,
hexagon
no.
terminations.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work yet.
No, what actually was the right-hand dancers. Let's take the ladies, blue, red, and orange, but we only concentrate on the blue lady. Make a right-hand star, 2 positions. So she meets the orange guy. And then she goes on with that orange guy, 2 more positions, and ends up where the lady in red has her original home position with the guy in orange. And the guy in blue gets picked up by the red lady and ends up where the orange guy is at home. This is the where a heads flutter wheel ends in a real hexagon.
Can I summarize that then? That you wind up, the ladies wind up in the nearest head position to their right, while the boys wind up in the nearest head position to their left. Is that correct?
Yeah, they wind up in the nearest head position on their own side.
On their own side. Okay, that's a good, neat way of looking at it. Yeah.
And
so it varies from the square in the sense that it geographically it doesn't match, but it matches in every other respect.
Yeah. And a freebie that's not in here and that's not in the handout. This result you also have when you call heads reverse flutter wheel. You will get the same result. And you also get the same result when you call heads go right and left through. This is just something that took me quite some time to figure out.
So the way to think about it is that you're working with your nearest head.
Yeah.
Is that correct? So for a number 1 man, he thinks whatever call I have to do with another heads person, be it a male or a female, it's going to be the nearest position to my left. That's a head position I'm working
in most cases, yes. I will come to that again, but when you start to call hexagon like this, it is easy for many calls to start with heads or sides, go forward and back, and usually dancers clap their opposite's hand, the person that they meet, and with their free hand, and usually this person is the one they're going to do the next call with, except for star figures like flutter wheel. But this is just to get you going, and look at the definition and apply that definition verbatim to what happens in a hexagon. But the problem is the flutter wheel definition says opposite. We don't have a truly defined opposite in a hexagon. It's sometimes to your right and sometimes to your left. And you usually never know. When you call a hey ladies chain, you had done some stuff with pass-through and a lot of easy stuff. And then you call a hey ladies chain, you think that's a call that's just easy. But the girls look at, oh, that is the opposite I have. And they might start a ladies chain suddenly with the left hand. I've encountered this more than once. When we look at the call's properties, what type of a call is it? You can only determine this when you look at the call in a hexagon. Does it work around the perimeter? Like circle left, right and left grand? Is it hugging the wall? You know, when you're kind of drunk, you try to go along at the wall, or when it's somewhere dark, calls like square through, pass through, star through are like that. Walk and dodge. It is a Y-shaped call. A chain X are going in the Y shape. Does it go through the center or around the middle, like flutter wheel, ladies chain? And now we have some calls that are easy in a square and they're easy in a hexagon.
Yeah, Guido,
Everything, yeah.
that's right. I'm just looking at that, and I think that would be a little bit easier to actually understand if you had the couples numbered 1 through 6. You could see that the blue man, who's number 1, and the blue lady, that's the ending position after a flutter wheel. You could see that flow that they split.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, the same with the right and left through. They would go in, but they would go in on the Y for the right pull by and then come back. And it's that split kind of an action for the heads that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then you have all calls that are just along the walls, like square through. These calls are all easy, because it's what the dancers do regularly. And all others are on the more difficult side, but it really depends on situation and call. And some of the difficulties I show you here.
I don't see the PowerPoint anymore.
You're probably the only one. Sorry, hi Google.
We still see.
Just unshare and reshare. It should come back up.
Okay.
I stop. And I Up. Do you see it now? Good. Calls that are easy in a square might be difficult in a hexagon. Here's a combination that is easy in a square, but it's difficult in a hexagon. Everything beyond A chain 3 will be difficult. This has to do with the nature of what I said. When dancers transmogrify the definition, the necessary definition, in their putting of actions. When you do a 8-chain X call, those couples going into the center walk then out of the center. And on the other side, they do the courtesy turn and they have the right pull by, go back into the center, and they walk out of the center. This is very important. They don't walk in a straight line from A to B. They go into the center, do a halfway point between A and B, and they walk out of the center. And when we take,
so is it true? Is it true then when they're doing an 8-chain, say 2, that they're doing one passing action in the center and then a courtesy turn in their new head position? Is that correct? If you're having the heads do it?
It's actually the same thing, but what dancers will do when the number is higher than 3, they will not walk into the center and out of the center. They will not walk the Y shape. They will start to walk a triangle, and after at least 4 hands, 5 hands, they will be in a wrong way grand, and they don't know where to courtesy turn and where not. So this is a very difficult call. And you should avoid that until the dancers are familiar with that setup. They will have problems.
And ending up with another one when you started with.
Yeah, but this is not the real problem. The problem is they walk suddenly in a wrong way grand. They will make a circle out of it. Unless you have accomplished hexagon dancers, they will stay in that formation. But when you have dancers that never danced hexagon before, don't call a chain 6. Call pass through trade by 3 times. They make that. But if you call a chain 6 and say swing your corner, they don't know who they should swing. Any call with arm turns in the center, like swing through, spin the top, spin chain through, scoot back, these are difficult for dancers. Because here, again, you need to find out what they exactly do in the center. And in a spin chain through, we talk about 3/4. It's 3 positions, but dancers also need to count the positions where nobody is there. It's just like in a square. When you have a quarter tag formation and you call it a spin the top, you have this turn half, this is okay. And then the centers turn 1/4 and are perpendicular to the sides. Then you turn another quarter, then you're looking at the empty spot again. And then you turn the 3rd quarter and they're perpendicular to the sides again. While the dancers on the outside go 1/4, 1 position forward to the end of the new ocean wave. This is what they do in a square, and this is what they do in a hexagon. But for the dancers, it's a lot more complicated because in the center, the distances are far shorter than the distances in a square. They will have problems. It's past the ocean. This will break down even accomplished square dancers. When you call heads past the ocean or sides past the ocean in a hexagon, they don't know what to do. You really have to teach them to call from the very beginning with a pass through, face your partner, step to an ocean wave, and get back into the center together.
What about just stepping to a wave? Heads step to a wave, so they're all stepping.
They do that. That's no problem. There is no arm turn involved.
But they've got a Y in the middle, haven't they?
Yeah.
They've got a Y wave in the middle.
That's what I showed before. This is no problem.
The problem with past the ocean is that that partner wasn't the one you had before.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And you need to face it and step to an ocean wave. Dancers will have problems. Don't call past the ocean in the beginning.
So essentially anything that you're looking at pretty much static square, if you're going to call that, you're going to be looking at, you have to make sure that the dancers understand that all of your heads movements, all of your sides moves are actually a split type action rather than a normal action. And so once and then when you, for instance, on Pass the Ocean as example, you've got to again modify your definition slightly that they don't take hands as they go by. They do a complete pass through and then face a new partner step to a wave. Okay.
This is what is important. Find out.
But if you think about it from the normal square, if you have the head step to a wave, you have the wave between the two side couples, right? So if you have the heads, all the heads in a hexagon square step in and they turn slightly because they're heading out to the other head position, then they form a wave in front of the sides. And so that still seems logical. Yeah.
Yeah, they get the Y wave, but this is another place where you don't want to do that catch left hands as you go by, because it becomes about an eighth turn instead, or a quarter turn instead of a half turn. Or sorry, an eighth turn instead of a quarter turn.
So Pass the Ocean is one of the most difficult calls.
Yeah, so do it like it's a pass through face, new partner, and okay.
And Ferris wheel is difficult at first. The dancers, if you just call Ferris wheel, they won't know what to do. And actually, you should go back to the real old definition of Ferris wheel that starts with do half a circulate for those who look into the center. And then do your wheel and deal type. But this is one of the easier, it takes a couple of instances when you teach it, and it's okay. From then on, they will do it. That's no problem. Now I have some choreography that I call ready to call and ready to impress, because this is really choreography that you can use. You can call element left in the Alamo style, and you call all Alamo choreography that ends with original partner on the right hand and original corner on your left. And then you call left element or right and left grand, whatever you want. There is a small module that's a fun thing to do. That's like head straight, boy straight, girl straight, side straight, head straight, boy straight, girl straight, side straight, and you do it a third time in a hexagon, and everybody's on the right hand again. For dancers who dance hexagon at the first time, this is difficult choreography because they have to look, they have to watch what they're doing, and really listen. For you, as I call it, that's not really difficult.
So a swing through in the Alamo style has to be done 3 times to get your original part of that, correct?
Right. Everything, well, as I say, everything, most everything you do in a square twice, you do in a hexagon 3 times to go back. But there are some exceptions because you suddenly started mixing dancers. When you call heads go forward and back and head square through 6, you can call all 2 couple choreography that actually keeps those 4 dancers in this foursome. Then you have bring him back to the corner box and call element left. The same goes when you call start through pass through. Then you are in that formation that I call heads or sides lead straight ahead box, which means that couple number 1 is facing directly couple number 4 on the other side of the hexagon. Call around what you want, keep them in that formation, get the heads to the outside, and call dive through square through 3, and you have everybody right in front of the corner for an element left. And when you do this, dancers believe they are dancing hexagon because you brought them over to somebody else and not kept them on the same side as in a corner box or a right-hand lady box.
Sorry, Guido, can you back up a second?
Sure.
I'd like to make a comment too.
Yeah, 1 second, John. So what you're saying is from a static hexagon, instead of calling square through 4 and working in the corner box as it is the second couple across, that we're going to do, if you do a square through 6, you're going to set that up, and then you're doing essentially isolated sight, two couple choreography. As long as you don't do a 0 module, but you do 2 couple choreography, swing through, boys run, bend the line, right and left through, flutter wheel, slide through, you're back in that corner box, and you can do any 2 couple isolated sight routine on this, and it will feel like hexagons even though it's not that whole flirtation. Is that correct?
Yeah, you could even call the chicken plucker.
Yep.
3 times. The sequence has to be done 3 times.
So effectively you've done a heads pair off.
Yeah.
Heads pair off, and then you've got 3 boxes, is that right?
Yeah, John?
Yeah.
I'd like to make a comment. You know, while termination sequencer doesn't work, if you go to the individual moves, they are displayed in hexagon. So we can see the moves. You just can't see them on the sequencer, but the the moves like Past the Ocean is available in Hexagon. So, I mean, that would be a great addition to this discussion here.
Okay.
It is available, and not in the sequencer, but in the individual moves. You can see that on Taminations. I think that would really help your conversation here, Guido. Maybe Mel could help you out here.
Yeah, we can do it in I have about 4 or 5 more slides and then I'm done. You call heads lead right or sides lead right. You call everything that works in the lead right box and keep them in the lead right box. You even can do stuff that brings them across the square, like the chicken plucker pattern or the route at least, and get him back to the lead right box, call swing through right and left grand, which is difficult for many, or make it easy, call turn through element left and right and left grand. A fun call is if you call heads go forward and back, heads do sa do, and then say boys or girls go forward and back and do sa do. This is not hard to do, and the dancers will have it probably at the first time that I've done it. And I think it's fun because it's a threesome do sa do. Follow that with star choreography to original partner and corner, and then you're back in a 0 box or a corner box and do something and resolve as if in a square. This here is a singing call everybody knows. The sequence. Hits promenade half, square through 4, right and left through wheel, left Ferris wheel, but then call pass through instead of square through 3 and swing. So the regular Ferris wheel figure instead of square through 3, call pass through, and you have a singing call. This is one that you really don't have to learn. A nice one is heads or sides, square through 6, H and 6, swing and promenade. And as I said before, you must substitute H and 6 with pass through trade by 3 times because dancers will not do an H and 6. But what helps is this is actually a technical 0. You start with the heads inside of the when you start with head square through 6, you start with the heads in the center with one form of their opposite, and you have the sides with original partners on the outside. And after the H and 6, you have the heads on the other side of their home position on the outside, and the sides with their opposite in the center. Everybody's facing the corner. So this is a cute thing, and for the dancers, it really feels like a dancing real hexagon. And since I said pass through trade by 3 times, you also can replace that with the chicken plucker variations. This one is one of the singing calls I tried. This is a regular square singing call with a corner lady progression, and in a real hexagon, it starts to be a right hand lady progression. The head square through 4 gets everybody to the right hand lady, and then it's just keep it there and swing and promenade. It's important to know it's a right hand lady progression. And all singing call choreography that starts with a square through 4 and keeps you in that box is a right hand lady progression. If you make that a square through 6, it's a corner lady progression. And just don't put any calls in there that takes your partners apart. Square through 3 in the center is a no-go.
Yeah.
In that sense. And
Guido?
yeah,
One alternative to get to that corner box and not working with 6 hands all around is to use some equivalents like star through, California twirl, or touch a quarter boy run, which
look
gets you
at the
very
last line.
fast.
Look at the last line.
Okay, I was too fast. Okay.
And a couple of helpful hints. When you call for hexagons, when there is no square present, just numbers from 4 to 6. Take a square through 6 instead of a square through 4. It's easier for your dancers. If you start with a right and left grand with your partner, call a right and left grand 6 hands. Or, as I said, HN4 to an HN6. But really don't call HN6 unless the dancers know the path and follow that path, because they will, most times, they will go into a wrong way grand, and the choreography doesn't work then. Many modules, when 2 times make it a 0, 3 times make it a 0 in the hexagon. Not all times, but very often. And when you dance in a hexagon, boy number 1 remains boy number 1, regardless wherever he may end in a sequence. And the boy number 1 is responsible to adjust the duration of promenades to the duration of promenades in squares. When a caller calls a promenade from across halfway back home, in a hexagon, you only are allowed to promenade 2 positions, and end up at that position that is in the same family as your home position. If you're head, you should stay head. If you're a side, you must stay side, unless the caller tells the squares to go somewhere else. And this is the responsibility of boy number 1. In most cases, if somebody else takes the responsibility from somewhere else because of experience, it's okay. Generally, the one with the most experience should be in position 1.
But Guido, doesn't the number 1 boy, he can stop at any head position, and that'll determine where the head, he doesn't have to go back to number 1 position all the time. He can stop at any head position, can he?
Yeah, he starts at any head position. When
he doesn't have to go back to number 1 each time. He can, if they promenade, he can stop at the next available head, but he's the one that determines where he stops.
When you have a singing call where the promenade starts at home, the promenade in a square is 4 positions. If the hexagon people would promenade 6 positions to get back home to original home, that would take too long. They would go 2 positions more than they would go in a square. So he will end up at position number 4. Well, number 5 in this case. And if the promenade in a square is only 2 positions, they also promenade 2 positions. The boy number 1 stays boy number 1, regardless wherever he ends a sequence. And he has to make sure that his hexagon ends in an appropriate position so that sides are sides and heads are heads. This is just a hint. You don't have to follow it, but it helps to success.
So if I'm correct on that, before you put that up,
yeah.
It's one of the things that's sort of bombarding the chat here. The promenades are adjusted. The question that was coming up earlier is, are promenades adjusted to home to allow for it? And you said it's always promenade 2 positions, but as I understand that, for instance, if I get to a corner box, I'll be in that left-hand thing for my swing. So it's from there 2 positions past your home. So it's your home position, the next position, it's the 3rd position. You always stop there.
No, you promenade the same distance. When the square promenades 4/4, you promenade 4/4 in a hexagon. When
Okay,
the
so
square has to
that's the adjustment. So it's a promenade is 4 positions, because I notice in some of the singing called choreography, if you're going to start in the right hand quadrant,
yeah.
so it's always past the quadrant you're dancing in 4 positions will either bring you home or bring you to the new position. Is that correct?
It's yeah. When you promenade from the side position 3/4, you promenade 3 positions, but you have to end up in a head position as a head boy and a side or
Yeah.
as a head boy, and on the side position as a side boy.
Always
It really
always at least 2 then.
it really doesn't matter in a hexagon, because in probably less than 1% of all dances, the sequence will bring a square and a hexagon back home.
Okay.
Um,
It was just a clarification. It was asked on the promenade, so always at least 2 positions, but you always adjust to, if you're ahead, you promenade the lead man to the head position wherever it is. It's a normal promenade.
So what you're saying, Guido, is that the number one man is not opposite the caller all the time. He's going to be anywhere in the hall, wherever he happens to wind up. Yes.
so sometimes before I said square choreography will disorder your hexagon.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So
I got that.
Dancing in a hexagon building would be a big advantage.
Yeah, but my dancers dance in a pentagon room. They dance hexagon in a pentagon room. So it's kind of difficult. No.
And you charge for a square?
Yeah. Sometimes I have squares, but most times I have hexagons. And I also had hexagon and square at the same time. So I call for the square. And the hexagon people have to dance square choreography in the hexagon. And when I call square through, they need to know that it's square through 4 hands, and the right and left grand ends after 4 hands. Even though I usually adjust it to when I only call for hexagons to get them back to original partner and original corner for their own convenience. But it's just a matter of adjustments. It's not really difficult, but it's something you should know when you dance as a preparation to call hexagon, and try yourself out in a hexagon and to see if you can do it. It helps if you danced it before you call it. And just to go to my last slide, here's a little literature. And I didn't know that terminations had hexagon animations. That would have been in there also then. And this is about it.
Okay. Just a couple of things that came up.
Yeah.
Just before we open it up. You stressed that square dance choreography changes when you call square dance choreography. You clarified that with a square through takes you right instead of left, square through 6. You have to make minor adjustments there. You've clarified the promenade, which is good. And the last question was on slide, hang on, I gotta go up here. Slide 30. That spin the top looked like you had couples going 3/4 in the center. Is that correct? As couples?
No, this is a general line. It looks in both directions.
Okay, so it was.
This is just when you have an ocean wave here, and you would call spin the top, you'd end up here. And if you start spin the top here, and this would be an ocean wave, you'd end up here.
Okay, so it's only the centers that are active then.
No, everybody is active. Yeah, in a spin the top, in the center, because this is when you call a spin the top in a square, from a quarter tech position, you have the ends in that wave they're facing two empty spots.
Yeah.
Because
I'm with you.
and when you call a spin the top, the ends are centered to the cup is on the outside. So when you call a spin the top from a quarter tag formation like this, you would have the compass in the center, centered to the outside couple.
Yep.
And this is what I say: whatever you do in a hexagon, whenever you do in a square, this must be the same thing. You must be able to call the same call in a hexagon as if you were in a square.
Yeah,
If you call,
I think the question was, whoops, sorry, if I undo that. I think there was animation on that slide, or were you just flicking back and forth between slides?
these are two slides. This is slide 29.
Okay.
This is slide 30.
Okay, so you were just going up and down.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's fine, because it just looked like animation on.
Yeah, this was the purpose.
Oh, okay. No, that's fine. And the last comment was better not to use the terminations for hexagons to show it until you're finished, because I'm just going to pull it up. It says there, yeah. Most of the definitions are written for two couple dancing, or three couple dancing, if you will. So heads, or you've only got the three couples demonstrated. You don't see the relative position of heads past the ocean. You only see it as three couples. But that's fine.
Important to finalize this is you really need to look at the definition, what it does. Like if you have a scoot back, the person doing the flip is going 2/4. That's meaning two positions.
Yeah.
And you have to do that in a hexagon also. And this looks very awkward. And when you look at that call at the first time, it is very difficult for a novice caller in hexagon to see what is really happening. Get yourself some checkers and push it through and find out if you have the same formation after the call in a hexagon or in a square. It must be the same thing. And the action must be exactly the same. But the angles are not the same thing. But you need to count positions. And this is why I said a hexagon is a 6/4 square.
Okay, well, ladies and gentlemen, that is all the questions that came up in the chat. We're now at the top of the hour. Just as a note, the notes and the presentation are going to be available on the chat. Guido's got a couple of, one slide that he's just got to make a correction to, and that's to flip the centers around in his square. His hexagons are perfect, but his square dance choreography was kind of out of whack. Happens to all of us, but all of those will be available on the OC Callers website. Mark Hart will be posting that up. Have you stopped sharing there, Guido? Yes, you have.
Yep.
I'm just going to share the contamination screen. There it is. And why has that got such a great big box on it? I have no idea. Anyway, for the hexagons, if we want to look at that, but the floor is open for discussion. If anybody has any questions for Guido on the hexagons?
I thought of one thing.
Goog has a question up, then Michael. Anybody? Okay, so we'll start with Goog.
If you, I mean, we look at when we call normally, we have sequences and relationships and so on. How many sequences and how many relationships are there in hexagon?
Same as in a square.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Because you only look at 4 dancers and everything is, how do you say, Vicky, weißt du, was punktsymmetrisch auf Englisch heißt?
Working around the center, the symmetric around the center.
Yeah, it's the same thing as in a square. Since you're working symmetric, kind
of mirror image like.
Yeah.
So if you're going to look at them alphabetically or numerically, you can get a whole bunch of different relationships. But the fundamental principle is after your initial movement head squared through, all of your formations or arrangements in a hexagon are exactly the same as those in a square. You've still got the same boy, girl, boy, girl, boy, boy, girl, girl. All the rest of it is the same as any four-couple relationship, whereas opposed to rectangles, that will change.
Yeah, you have a lot of arrangements. You have 20 different arrangements in rectangles and 36 sequence states in rectangles.
Thank you. Now we're talking.
But in real hexagons, it's just the same as a square because you look at 4 dances only.
And Michael, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I've been calling real hexagons a couple of years. I really have done them through quite a bunch of levels. And I figured out that when I call for just real hexagons with no squares there, I like to have the number one man with the promenade get back home to his place, because I do a lot of side calling and resolution on real hexagon as well. And I have some simple hints which do help. Calling for the real hexagon, you always got 4 dancers facing a wall. And you have 8 dancers facing a corner. So if they need to adjust, always tell them and ask them for checking the formation, who's looking at the wall and who are those looking at the corner. So this is one hint, which maybe when working to the outside of the hexagon, everything more or less is normal, just like in a normal square. Okay, the angles may be a little bit different and it's a little bit less to dance, but still looking out of the real hexagon, it just feels like normal. When looking inside, the closer you get to the center, it is kind of like getting into a traffic circle, and you go in there and then 2 people walking in there, we split up and we take the next exit to work with that person. If couples are facing inside, like on lines facing, it's the same thing. The one couple, the closer we get to the center of the real hexagon, the one couple goes over to the left, the other one to the right, and that's where we find our opposite to work with. And any angle we have working 100 through the center, going 180 degree, like a trade or whatever, goes back to 120. So what Guido showed on his slides with the spin the top, where we have 3/4, and 2/3 of a 3/4 makes 180. So it takes only 2/3 going through the center of what we have in a normal square, taking the degrees. Yeah, that was about that. And I think it was an awesome presentation by Guido. Really good.
Yeah. I like that analogy because now it's suddenly I can visualize it. A square is like an intersection with
Right.
stop signs and yield signs. A hexagon is like 3 roads intersecting with a roundabout in the middle.
There we go.
And it suddenly, I don't know why, but that just suddenly made it clear to me.
Well, the first time I danced hexagon was with Andy Alameo down in California, and the first thing he did when I got there is he had an old coil out of a refrigerator, and he put it right down in the middle of the hexagon. He says, nobody goes through that. Nobody ever crosses the center of the hexagon.
Right.
So, I mean, you always go up and you go to a 60 or you go 120 one way or 120 the other way, but nobody ever crosses the center. And it was,
I have a rodeo
lot of
clown in
sense.
the middle pushing them outside.
Well, whatever. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But, and there's one thing I would like to add is with the 8-chain through or 8-chain 6 or whatever, which is really tough. And I figured out why. And you only should let people do that who have a garden and who laid paths there. You know, always tell them, stay on the path, don't walk over the grass. It's always that people take the shortcuts, and that when it gets into a circle. So they really have to keep and stick with the formation. Yeah.
This is a problem with many dancers, that in HN6 they make a wrong way grand out of it. Is after 4 it starts to flare out.
Hey, did anybody go up on Terminations, look at some of these moves?
Yeah,
It's pretty neat.
I've got it. I was just waiting for us to get ready for the conversation. That's all.
It's pretty neat to go through and look at these moves you're talking about. I mean, they're pretty descriptive on the Terminations.
Okay, so this is the 8 chain through that he was talking about.
And you really have to go to the center, and that's when you take the next exit and go back out. Yeah, if you don't do that, then it converts into a circle more or less.
Yeah, you have to veer left or right.
You just pick the HN1, yeah.
Yeah, it just wasn't clicking.
It's really kind of cool when you get it done.
But Mel, take the HN6. That's the cool one, because it shows you exactly what happens. Now they start all with their partner, now, and after the HN6 nobody has their partner.
And that's why you want to avoid that. Is that correct?
No, you want to avoid it because people don't dance the HN6 as the Terminations do. They will dance a wrong way grand at the end. But when you start at a corner box, you will have a corner box at the finish when you call it HN6. But it's easier to call any combination of the chicken plucker routine from and do that 3 times instead of the HN6, because dancers will have problems.
So,
is it also true that if you start in the 8 chain through formation and the heads are on the outside, that the heads are going to be courtesy turning in heads positions all the way around the square, so they should come out and do a proper courtesy turn. In other words, it's got a lot to do with how they dance the 8 chain 4, hasn't it, or 8 chain 6?
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. This is what I'm trying to stress during the entire presentation. There is, except that calls feel different and the formation looks different, it's the same thing as in a square. Everything that works in a square works in a hexagon in the same way, just adjusted to different angles.
Yeah, I think this is the bit that some people were getting confused on. You mentioned scoot back as an example. Yep. Now, when it shows here, you've only got 3 couples of the 6 displayed. Yep. So if, for instance, if we were in an Alamo ring like this, could you call a scoot back from a hexagon?
Well, you would have to say heads or sides.
So it's always going to be defined heads or sides. Is that correct? Not just touch a quarter, scoot back.
No, you can when you have a regular hexagon set up and say heads touch a quarter and everybody scoot back. That's no problem. It's the same thing as in a square.
Okay.
It's just a difficult move for dancers because they don't know where to go. They really have to learn how far are 2 quarters, 2 positions when they turn.
When starting with beginners, I would leave those calls which easily work in boxes like flutter wheel and scoot back, and would not do them in triangle boxes, but get them to the outside and have them working, because that's really the tough thing. The others working with directly opposite, like right and left throughs or star throughs, square throughs, in the middle is much easier to get to the outside and then move them around the hexagon around the surface and then resolve again. I think
that's what Guido was saying earlier. Was some of the simple calls, like you said, right and left through, etc., and the Alamo ring styles, the DARs work for setting it up, but then from there you set up. I think you did a square through 6 or touch a quarter boys run to set up that corner box, and then you just do isolated site. It feels like
Right.
hexagons, but it's not. And that's the way I interpreted that.
Yeah, and for variety, and to fool the dancers even more, is you call heads or side square through two hands, and you have them on the other side. And you resolve that just with the right and left to dive through square through three. And for the dancers, it's they were on the other side, and they had to go back through the hexagon to their corner. But here you can see when do they start with their partner with the right and left through?
Yes.
This is look when you look at the red couple, they are on the top after that, facing each other, more or less. Just as I said, with a flutter wheel and a reverse flutter wheel, it's the same thing.
Just got to picture the other couples in the gaps.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Flutter wheel, reverse flutter wheel, and right and left through have the same net effect, just different body flow. Even here.
Sorry?
Even here.
Yep.
So Guido,
Yeah.
just shifting levels slightly. So if you're in a hex column, which is a Y shape,
Yep.
The normal scoot back is going to still have the same. You're still going to have the same person by the hand after the scoot back, but the triple scoot back will change because the action's in the center. Is that correct?
Yeah. Makes it difficult for the centers.
Yes.
Suddenly.
That's your right hand column.
Yeah.
So the normal scoot back's okay, but the triple scoot is the one that's going to.
As I said, this here proves what I said. Everything you do in a square is the same thing in a hexagon.
So even though it looks like these centers are not in a scoot back, these centers are not reacting with each other at all.
Mm.
So if I did a scoot back here, the number one man would just flip over and the girls would turn through.
Yeah,
Correct?
as in a square.
Yeah, exactly the same.
It'd be
And
different
if
if
you
you would say the center scoot back. That'd be then different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the.
Doesn't have it here.
That would be this.
Yes.
They do have a triple scoop back up on the advanced. You could go find that and do a triple scoop back. It's there. You have to go into the, you have to get out of mainstream. It's advanced. It's got triple scoop back. It's there.
So it would have to be called 3 times, Guido, to get it to zero back to the same column.
But when it zeros twice, calling it twice in a square, you need it thrice in a hexagon.
Right.
But triple scoot is in plus, or is going to be in plus, but I think in termination he still got it in the advanced program.
Yeah, it's in the A1, I think.
It's going to be in plus.
They got all these things in the hexagons. I wish they had them in the.
No, you have to go into the call. You have to go into the program A2, get on triple scoot, and then
I
you
wasn't.
got-
I wasn't looking for triple. I can pull that up if you want. I was.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned square through. I was looking at square through from a static hexagon, but I can't find it. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and it ends up with a right-hand lady progression.
And here you see that the distance those centers travel is far shorter than if they were in a square.
But
So
there's
this-
the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's same thing with the even numbers. You would get to the outside, and with uneven numbers, you would be facing right between the gaps.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because the timing is actually the same.
Yeah, but since
More
the distance
thinking.
is shorter, since the distance is shorter, dances will be faster.
Yeah. No, I was just saying the timing allocated is the same.
Mhm.
Okay, so you wanted to look at what was it? Triple scoot, was it?
All right.
Just that arrow at the end of the green bar there, that'll take you right back. See that arrow on the left of the square of the family?
Ah, okay. Thank you.
Hit that one there, and that'll take you down. You just down to A1 there. Triple scoots in there somewhere.
And suddenly you have it mixed up.
Yeah, taking a look at the 6 lady, she's not coming back.
She's going to go there.
And
So you've got a fold, 3 trades, and 3 stars, 2 position, and 3 dancers doing a star, 2 positions.
All right.
And this is what I mentioned before. If you have a call that goes through the center, like a square through 3, or here is scoot back, this disorders your hexagon, and suddenly you might need to be able to resolve it.
I
Which
was
is
just
not-
I was
Yeah.
just curious about this one.
That was good.
Cool.
A really cool.
Motivate is cool, but what really is tough is related doozy. That's
Yeah.
a toughie.
Related doozy is tough, and spin chain exchange to gears is a very nice call. Very
Yeah.
easy.
That looks like it flows real nice once you get used to it.
Yeah, but that's really tough because you got to be careful with the gaps and the circulates you're doing and working
Yeah.
around the set.
I could see that one turning into a triangle instead of a Y.
Yeah.
Well,
What
that's the
was
whole
it?
part about hex is you have to make sure you have your maintain
Look at
that
spin chain
120
exchange.
degrees to each other.
That's a beautiful call.
Yeah.
We're very crowded in dominations.
Yeah.
Okay, Mel,
Yes.
would you call a spin the top from here?
It won't do a spin the top from here, but I can do a spin the top from right hand ways.
Right hand waist, the green one.
No.
There we go.
Okay,
This
I wanna
one.
do it there, yeah. Spin top.
Yeah, and in a tidal wave.
That's what I thought, but you had him in your presentation in some T-bone thing.
Yeah, but
no, he was just going back and forth between the slides to show what the thing. I thought it was an animation as well.
it was in a quarter tag formation.
So if you spin the top from here, what happens?
The triangle.
or center fan the top?
End up there.
Yeah, but
Okay.
if you call spin the top from a quarter tag formation, this is what I was showing.
A quarter tag.
Yeah, this is what if when the
Hinge a
triangle,
quarter.
the T-bone, what he said.
Do a hinge.
Yeah, this isn't a sequencer, so it won't. It'll only allow me to set up the definitions. It doesn't have that as a setup.
And when you call head spin the top from nothing, this is the same thing as if you would call head step into the center and face your and then spin the top.
So that's
Yeah.
your T-bone for a hex.
Yeah. Right.
Or sorry, your quarter tag for a hex.
No, the quarter tag is it will end in a quarter tag.
Yeah, but you have it here.
Now you could call extend. You're in the quarter tag now.
And if you would do spin the top again, then you would have them kind of a T-bone like standing in between.
Yeah, as where Mel paused it.
Yeah.
Before. Stop. Here.
Yeah.
This is what I had, but just as a general line formation picture. And when you call it, when you call a spin the top from here, you will end up in a quarter tag formation. And when you call it from a quarter tag formation, you would end up back in this.
Okay.
It's the same thing as in a square. Exactly the same thing. What makes it a little bit wishy-washy is that there is, like Lady Diana would have said, it is a bit crowded. There are 3 of them, and it's a bit crowded.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else want to look at any specific movements? If not, I shall stop the share. So, as I said, the notes from Guido's presentation and his PowerPoint slides will be available on the OC Callers website. Mark Hart will be posting those up with the video. Guido's just going to make a couple of minor changes to his slides. I sent you your PowerPoint presentation with just a couple notes on where it was there, Guido. So just flick that back to me and to Mark when you're done, or just flick it to me and I'll get it to Mark. I want to say thank you very much, Guido, for coming in and giving us a much simpler look at hexagons, delving into from the start to the finish to make it look easier. I personally have not used hexagons. I use rectangles, and I just modify and fudge with things like relay the Ducey and 8-chain similarly, but you're really, really restricted on your choreography. I can see the advantage of it, so I'm going to try and wrap my head around it a little bit more. But thank you very much for coming in, and thank you for all the work you put into it. Much appreciated. And as always, thank you to Mark Hart, who is our IT technical guru. He had to step away for a little bit at the moment, but he will be back, and he will be posting everything up on the web pages. Next week, we have Dave Prescott coming back to do part 2 of mental imaging, which is a slightly different approach, but him and Don Beck have worked together and had long sessions on that. And they're looking at it just taking similar to Guido's approach to hexagons, just a little bit more simplistic approach. A few questions came up in the last session, which he's going to be addressing. In the last session, he was keeping it limited to those 7 movements, and there are a lot of things that expand past that, such as when are things an X and a Y, or sometimes X, sometimes Y. And he'll be addressing those in next week's presentation as well, again with the handouts and everything. And I have nothing scheduled after that. We were going to be looking at get-ins and get-outs, or a re-look at that, but that was done with Dawn today, so we're going to push that back a little bit more. And if anyone has any ideas, or anybody has a presentation that they would love to give, or something they want to look at, by all means, please send me some suggestions, and we can have a look at them. I'm always looking for presenters. I do not have anybody booked past the 8th, which is next week, so if you do have something, let me know. Otherwise, you're going to have to be listening to my dulcet tones all over and over again. So, Thank you again, Guido, and thank you, everybody. The floor is open.
Guido, on singing calls, sorry, not on singing calls, on where you've got mixed squares, hex and normal squares. What's the effect on a normal square if you call for hex rather than, you said you called the normal
Mixes up
square?
the sequence.
It just mucks their sequence. So as long as they're happy with that, they can dance along, no trouble at all.
It's just when you call for a hexagon, you call a lot of chain sixes, no, square through sixes and right, left, right, 6 hands. It's just annoying in a square.
Okay.
But when you do that, if you just called, for instance, heads square through 4, swing through, boys run, bend the line, right and left through, flutter wheel, slide through, swing your corner, promenade, that will work for a static square. That will also work for a hexagon, except it's a right-hand lady progression, correct? Yeah, and they end up with, not with their original partner.
Whenever you call a hit square through 4 or equivalent working in a hexagon, you will have a right-hand lady progression if you don't have somebody go back into the center like a square through 3 or so, or scoot back in the center with 3, because that really messes up your phaser.
Mm-hmm.
You have suddenly the relationship has changed. But if you keep him in the box, it will be a right-hand lady progression, because then everybody is.
So if you call for a hex, the square is getting overdriven. If you call for a square, the hex is going underdriven, right? Is that the way it works, basically?
Yeah, but the thing is, when you call for a square, the choreography for a hexagon is often very interesting. So this is really something when you say, oh, this caller is boring, he's just calling it the same thing all the time, try to dance it in a hexagon. It suddenly might be very interesting and even difficult sometimes.
So
or just swing through, boy run, Ferris wheel, pass through. Oh, now they're gone. I lost my corner.
yeah, because that in a hexagon, that'll put them out of sequence.
I figured out some routines which work as well in a hexagon as in a regular square, and even use them for singing call. And one which really blows their mind on a hexagon is one which I use in squares as well, which is a heads lead to the right, veer left, bend the line, pass the ocean, and then have the end dancer go across to the next ocean wave with a circulate. And I do that with a spin chain through. And that's cool. And it brings you right back to the corner. And in the square, you can add a little bit if you got more time. But you may as well just run into a swing and promenade. So this is really a cool thing. It works just within the square and in the hexagon. Yeah, it's a lead right, veer left, bend the line, pass the ocean, spin chain through. And you're right there with your corner. And plus you could work with an AC-doocy and stuff like that. And that really goes crazy because, and then you just keep your isolated site, right? And I tell them in the real hexagon, because I prefer the number 1 man to get back home, because it's easier for me to follow everything when side calling, to just keep the entire hexagon really tight and speed it up with the promenade. Don't waste time with any twirls and bumps or stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's also what I do when I call just hexagons for my dancers. I'll get them to their original partner and the original corner as soon as possible after any sequence, and get them back home to original home. It's also easier and accommodating for the dancers, not only for me.
Well, can you hear me? I've changed to a different computer, and I don't know whether you can hear me. Is my microphone on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I've been interested. I got distracted for half the meeting. I've been interested in a sort of a technical choreographic question of which theory of hexagons you were using. It sounds as though you were using the correct theory, the one that I use, which says what you call could have been called those same words to an 8-person square, and they would get their corner. So the hex probably won't. Is that correct? Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
That is, I have been at, and this is sort of a hot button item with me. I have seen hex presentations in which the caller does something different. So you always get to your corner because they're not calling correct for a couple sequences. I saw a session of this at National Convention a while back that they invited me to call at because I'm known for calling hexes at New England Convention in the Northeast, and I'm good at it, and they appreciate it, and so on and so forth. So they have me do hexes, and in one of the sessions they had I think a full hour of what was called hex dancing with 4 different callers, all different theories or not all different, but different theories of how you resolve. And some of these callers were calling what I consider to be a different dance form. They were calling stuff in which the way they teach you to do certain calls is not compatible with what you would do if you said the same words to a square. And I was really, really upset and out of it because my stuff didn't work according to the dancers. And to make matters worse, it was a hex dancing session. In my opinion, there's no such thing. Hex is a novelty. And they packed us in calling one caller after another. And each 15-minute tip, we had new people coming in thinking they could pick it up. They couldn't, and so on. And I was third and was screwed. Anyway, it's good to know you are choosing the correct theory. The way I like to describe hex dancing is you go to a regular dance at which the caller is calling regular stuff to 8 couple squares. Remember those back before the pandemic? Anyway, you get 11 of your friends to hex up in the back, and you show off by dancing a hex to that same material. And you fully accept that you're not going to get your corner. That's okay. Anyway, that's my theory of doing hexes.
That's the same thing I do.
Okay.
What I said before during the presentation is you look at your call and define what the dancers have to do in a square, and they have to do it the same thing.
Yeah.
When I talk to people and say, how far do the dancers go, the side dancers go when they call sides face grand square on the first side?
Yeah.
Usual
Grand
answer
square is a very hard call.
No, not really. But when I ask this, I usually get the same answer all the time. They go 4 steps. And I say,
Yeah.
I didn't ask how many steps the dancers take to go somewhere. Where do they go to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And they go to the corner of the square at halfway of their home position, of their own home position, and the home position of the corner. And the next side go to the corner's home position. And the next side they go to the center of the square.
Yeah.
And the fourth side they go back to their own home position. In a hexagon, the outside sides are very, very short.
Mm-hmm.
And the insides are very long compared to a square. But the important part is you need to examine what the dancers are doing or should be doing.
And there were calls that are quite easy and calls that are quite hard, and you have to know which ones are which. And in that horrible session I was in, people were calling plus calls that happened to be easy, or so they thought, and it was a disaster.
Yeah.
And bend the line from lines back to back. The lines are sort of bent a little bit. So when you bend the line, you don't turn as a couple 90 degrees, you turn 60 degrees. You just have to get used to that, to know how to do that. And that is the correct thing. And you have to reassure the dancers that that's the correct thing. You know, bend the line up to the middle and back, and so on and so forth. It's not easy.
It's right. The degree numbers is just 2/3 of the original ones.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, if you're a super geek, you just take your position in a regular square as a complex number and raise it to the 2/3 power.
And the hints that
shut
work in the
everyone
real
up.
square also work. Like on a grand square or on a cloverleaf, you never cross any axis, right? But we got 3 axes. That's you got to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question, and it's about crossing the axis. So, for instance, if I take a figure such as head square through, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, in a square I would be pass through to an Alaman left. In a hex I'd be square through 3 to an Alaman left, and vice versa. So if I'm on a right-hand box, I'd be a pass through to my corner instead of a square through 3, and so on. How does that work with, and that's what I was just doing this boat. This is the figure I was looking at, because it's got a, okay, so square through. Now, if I was in a hexagon, any isolated or any 2-couple calling module will work as long as it doesn't interact across the center of the square. And that's how I understand it. But in a module like this, okay, so we do the swing through. In a hex, the scoot back is across the square, but in a hex, it's in your own foursome still.
Yep.
No, it depends on a triangle. It could be just the same. Because you got 3 ocean waves.
Yeah, no, I realize that, but the 3 are going in, but the scoot back there doesn't actually cross the center in the hex, does it?
You're in parallel waves, and you're in parallel waves also in a hexagon in that moment.
Right.
And so you have like the dancers 4 and lady 1 and boy 3. There would be in a hexagon also in there. And the dancers number 2, they would have different dancers to play with, but they, in a scoot back, they would end up just if you call it part and trade.
Right.
So even though they cross the center, the scoot back would be perfectly acceptable there.
You got 3 boxes.
Yeah. That's what I thought. No, I was just looking at the crossing the square. These are the interactives. Like Ferris wheel and pass through is an interactive, but that does not work in a hex. But scoot back will work.
You don't cross the center here. You would cross the center if you had been deviated by the center point of the hexagon, and that you don't do there. You're in a foursome and not in a sixsome.
Yeah, it's just all we've done is change the foursome from this way to this way.
Okay, got a question. If you call square through 4 touch a corner, could you call it triple scoot, where everybody goes forward to the next person turns to where they started?
No.
No.
Because the triple scoot has 3 dancers turning in the center, 3 couples trading, and 1 lonesome dancer flipping.
So then you could call a grand scoot back?
No.
If you can't call it in an 8-person square, you can't call it in a hex.
All right.
You might get away with it, but it's wrong.
Okay.
But you could call a regular scoot back.
Yep.
Because they're only working in their own box.
And be aware that a scoot back is just a trade. So whatever rules you may have that you're trying to obey about crossing a center line or whatever it is, you don't need to worry about it. It's just a trade. You just call it even if you think that it would otherwise be illegal.
So as I understand, I'm just trying to get my head around this. If I'm doing, even in a hexagon, if I'm doing just 2 couple calls, the mathematics work even if I cross, like if my box is sideways or if my box is up and down. For instance, the scoot back head square through, I'm working this way, but when I do this swing through, I'm changing the foursome I'm working with. As long as I stick to 2 couple calls that bring me back to that 2 couple grouping, it will work. But if I use a 4 couple call, such as a Ferris wheel or a spin chain through, that changes the parameters. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you have to go around the very center, then it gets tough.
Okay.
Yeah, when I sight call it at New England Convention, I do that all the time. Say head square through 4, star through, up to the middle and back. Now you have 2 facing couples. and you have another two facing couples, and you have a third two facing couples, whatever. You just call right and left through, Dixie style, recycle, sweep a quarter, flutter wheel, wrong flow, but never mind, and so on and so forth. You call isolated stuff there, and everything is cool. Then you pass through, bend the line, go on to the next people, and now all hell breaks loose.
Because that really opens up the choreography to simple hexagons. You know, you can get your lines facing up, bend the line right and left through, pass through, bend the line just to come back. You've got the interaction, but it's outside, two couple, outside. So two couple, two couple, two couple, two couple. As long as you're aware of it, you're really just doing rubber banding with two couples. And that'll open it up for making hexagons simpler to use, very similar to rectangles using movements that are really two couple movements with only a few variations. Okay.
In fact, if you've taught the dancers, if the dancers know how to do the calls, which is not easy, you have to teach them, you can just call ordinary stuff. Anything you think you could call it an 8-person square, you can call. But if you call a correct resolve that would resolve in an 8-person square, they won't get their corner. And you just have to be sure they're aware of the fact, which I always explain, you're not going to get your corner. And then I do a singing call in which they do get the corner, the last change, and then they're all happy.
Yeah, well, that's what Guido was saying. If you're doing that if you're going to call it as a singing call, you can either do a square through 6 to get them into that corner box relationship, or you can somewhere in your opener, break, closer do a 4 ladies chain, and then just call the rest of it as per normal.
Yeah. But I always do completely straight 8-person stuff, and I just consider myself lucky if they actually get their corners. And my canned singing call that I always do has that property.
Okay.
Cool.
Well, if and when I move to an area where I can get a square dance club started again, I think this is something I'm going to try and play with. Right now, it's going to be a checkers exercise.
Yep.
Cool.
Well, thank you very much, Guido, and Bill, and everybody else that's participated in this, because, as I said, hexagons were not my forte, the same as mental imaging is not my forte. But I'm looking at crossing the equator or going around the traffic circle now. It's opening my eyes to a lot of different ways of looking at calling that I just never thought of before. So I thank you very much for that. And as I said, all the notes and everything else are going to be available on the website after the sessions. Mark, Guido's going to amend the PowerPoint slides and send them to me, and I'll get them to you if he doesn't send them to you directly, and you can post them up when you do that.
Okay, yeah, I heard him say something about he's got to fix something earlier, and I thought, oh, that's when I sent you that message. Oh, I'm not going to post them yet.
I didn't realize you were back yet. I just saw you there. So does anybody else have anything they want to look at or any questions they might have? If not, we can open the floor up to any topic you want to chat about or call it an early day. My wife will be, I don't know if happy, but I'll be able to see her again. I don't know if she'll be happy about that because she's probably doing housework, and I'll walk across her wet floors like I managed to, regardless of when she washes them.
Guido, some people change their music so they've got 6 times through for hex squares. Do you advocate that, or do you adjust your standard music to work with your squares?
Well, I have once one break in there. Let's say make it a middle break, make it a closer, make it whatever. I'd advocate that you do it at the end, because sometimes dancers will mess up your timing, and when you need catching up to do, it's easier with a grand square and nothing else, instead of wasting time in the beginning. Wasting. Call your 6 sequences, and then call a closer type of a that just uses up the time that's left.
And you hope that they're in sequence.
One break in 6 figures, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes I still do the standard format, but do every second figure I do a pass through to swing so that you actually get a double progression. So you have a single progression figure, then a double progression figure. That's when I've been working hexagon, square hexagon sort of setups rather than true hexagon. But yeah.
A couple of years ago, McGregor put out some contra records on contra McGregor with 9x64. Then you have 3 breaks and 6 figures.
Right.
You're very quiet today, Betsy.
I'm learning.
It never stops.
And well, sometimes it does. But that's not what most of us want.
That's usually, yeah, mine usually stops when my brain explodes, which is days that end with the letter Y.
Could I just say thank you to Guido as well? I'm almost as southern as he is. I'm sitting in a hotel in Warsaw.
Okay.
What took you to Poland?
A Square Dance festival with Hanna and Lasse. So there's a lot of, some elderly vaccinated youngsters who have come here to dance Square Dance.
Cool. I'm glad you guys are up and dancing. We were for a while, but we're pretty much back in lockdown now. So for those of you that are dancing, I hope you're having a really good time and hope it doesn't happen to you again.
For many of us, this is the first time for 2 years.
Right. Does anybody have any more questions, comments, queries, points, discussion? If not, thank you very much for coming in. Reminder, next week we'll be here again talking mental imaging with Dave Prescott. He's doing a session 2 of his introduction to a slightly different look at mental image calling. Him and Don have been talking about it. The principles are the same, it's just a different aspect, and we do encourage looking at different aspects of square dance calling, different resolution techniques, because we always advocate there is no right there is no best or worst technique. The best technique is the one that works from you as a starting point to build from. So what may be right for Guido or Michael or Betsy may not be right for Dottie or Mel or Bill. But it doesn't make their preferences wrong, just different. So it's always good to expand your horizons, and I hope to see most of you next week. If that's it for today, thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Guido. That was good.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Guido. Very, very good presentation. Yeah, excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I've